Okay, Baroda, good morning everyone, and welcome to today's session on studying in the USA. Today we're going to give you some information about the International Exchange Programme here at Cardiff University and why you might want to study in the USA. I just have some housekeeping notes before we start. So all attendees will be automatically muted throughout the webinar. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions though, and that's through the Q&A function. Any questions that we don't have time to answer today, we'll make a note of these and answer them via email. And just so you know, this session will be recorded and it'll be accessible after today. So before we start the main part of the presentation, I just wanted to introduce myself. So hi everyone, I'm Jenny and I work within International Exchange here in the Global Opportunities team. This means that I support incoming and outgoing students before, during and after their exchange. Just a little about me. My international experience is a little bit different to the traditional study abroad in that I actually went to live and work in South Korea for 4 years after I finished uni. So, however, my experiences of living and working abroad has given me the opportunity to meet new friends from all over the world, to experience life in a completely different culture, and has helped to provide me with some invaluable examples for job interviews and applications over the years. So I think that's why I'm such a strong advocate for students going abroad, and hopefully during this presentation I can convince you to give it a go. And I hope you enjoy the presentation today. So remember, if you do have any questions, add these into the Q&A box. So you might be thinking, why should I go abroad? I know that you've probably heard these stats and figures in other talks, and I just thought before we started, it's worth emphasising and thinking about why you should go abroad in the first place. Recent research has shown that an international experience will improve your employability and will be a great addition to your CV. Graduate employers are looking for and really appreciate a global graduate. Research has also shown that having an international experience may even increase your future salary, which is good to know. Often students who've had an international opportunity will receive a higher degree classification too, as you can see on the quote here. Going abroad during your time here at Cardiff will also help develop key transferable skills such as teamwork, independence and problem solving. So what is international exchange? Well, the International Exchange Programme provides the opportunity to study abroad outside of Europe at one of our partner universities. Undergraduate students are able to study outside of Europe for a semester or year. It does depend on your degree programme. And the credits you gain abroad will contribute towards your degree here at Cardiff. We have partners all over the world. So we're talking about the USA today, but there's also Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, Mexico, Peru, South Korea and Hong Kong. There's loads. It does depend on your school where you're able to go, but each school has a different range of partners to offer. You can see a full list on the intranet. You'll also see some financial information, which I'll go into a bit more detail about later. So now that you know a little bit more about the International Exchange Programme, here are some questions that you might be thinking about, and this is what we're going to cover today. Of course, we're going to focus in on the US. So we've got where can I go? How do I choose? How much does it cost? What is the application process? And we're also very lucky that one of our ambassadors has joined us today just to talk about his experience. Why the USA? There's loads of reasons to study abroad, and you might be asking yourself, well, why should I specifically go to the US? Well, it's one of our most popular exchange destinations. This means that we have a lot of experience in sending students to the US, and we have really close ties with our colleagues in partner universities there. You know, it's popular for a reason. We've also got a great choice of partners. I think one of the best things about the US, it's such a huge country. I believe we have around 20, just over 20 US partners at the moment. Variation between states. So the experience that you're going to have is really going to vary between different states, and that's another great thing. Differences and similarities. So another great thing about the US is if you do choose to study there, you'll still be studying somewhere entirely new, in a completely different country with its own rules and academic culture. But there's also similarities between the US and the UK. So I think that means that the experience generally isn't going to be too overwhelming. Then we have recognition. Many of our US partners are really well known and incredibly popular in their own right. So when you look towards the future, having these recognizable names on your CV is going to be really useful. Finally, we've got travel. So I know this is about studying abroad, but a great appeal of how easy it is to travel around the US and visit different parts. As I mentioned before you start looking into specific host universities, the first place you should check is the intranet page for your school. So each school has a page where you can check your eligibility as well as see a list of partners that have been especially selected for your school. And these have been course mapped, so that means that they've ensured that there's suitable modules available. As you can see here, there might also be different partners depending on your degree classification. I just want to mention as well that you might be thinking about studying in the US and you have a really specific partner in mind, but you find that it isn't actually on the list for your school. Well, if that is the case, please do get in touch with us. Unfortunately, it's not guaranteed that we'll be able to assist you with this because it's dependent on quite a few factors, but I just want to let you know that we're happy to kind of facilitate that conversation if it does happen. So just briefly, here is a full list of our US partners. I've popped in the eligible schools on the right. We're very lucky, we've got 20 partners, but obviously do please check the internet for the most up-to-date advice. And I just took our partners and I put them on this map just to give you a visual idea of where they are. We've got a lot on the East Coast, but also some partners on the West Coast and central US as well. And just to highlight to you that during our Discover Global Opportunities Week, we're really lucky that some partners have agreed to come and give a presentation for us. So today we've got the University of Florida, they're giving a talk at 3:30, followed by the University of Wyoming at 4. You can see that there are other partners later on in the week as well. Please do pop along to these sessions. They're really invaluable, and in the past students have said that they're incredibly useful. Florida and Wyoming are really great partners, so do check them out. On to the main part of the presentation then. So how do I choose? Well, this is studying abroad, so academics really should be a key part of your decision making here. Studying in the US, it can be very different to the UK, so it's kind of a good idea to keep this in mind whilst you're looking at where to go. I put some of the most general common differences here. So we have assessed little and often. In the US, it's really common to be assessed quite often. This might mean class quizzes or homework assignments to complete. This can be great though, because it can give you an opportunity to catch up or to see how you're doing as you go. We then got class participation and discussion. We've heard from students in the past that class participation is a really big part of the US academic culture. And I personally think that that can be really interesting and you can get to know people in your classes as well. Attendance. We've heard that attendance can often be included in your grades at US partners. Obviously, it can differ between different partners. Casual atmosphere. So students report that it's quite casual and you really get to know your professors and talk to them during discussion times. Then we have letter grading. So a lot of universities in the US use letter grading, which is just something to be aware of. But please keep in mind that before you go away, you'll need to complete something called a learning agreement. On this learning agreement, your school will outline how they plan to convert your grades back to Cardiff marks, but still good to be aware of the grades you might get over there. Finally, we've got contact hours versus independent study. So in the US, there are generally more contact hours, which means time in class. It's very different to the kind of independent culture that we have here in the UK, but I think in the past, students have said that it's really refreshing and it's kind of nice to be part of this new academic culture. So I've put some quotes here from students who studied in the US in the past. I think Abby, who went to Northeastern, and Lauren, who went to San Francisco State, really kind of sum up the experience really nicely. So with academics, it's really important to do your research. You're going to hear me say that a lot during this presentation, and it's really true. So you might want to look at the different modules available just to see if these are in line with your academic interests. I've included this piece of advice from Katie, who went to Loyola Marymount. I just think it really highlights the importance of choosing modules, and like she says, it's just like going to uni in the UK, and you're not going to enjoy it if you're not studying something you enjoy. Also keep in mind that when you're looking at modules or module syllabi in the US, it can be sometimes quite difficult to find. So a good kind of tip here would be to contact the partner directly and say, can we have your course catalogues? I've just also put some advice here. So the first one would be speak to your school. Every academic school has an exchange coordinator who can help advise you on the academic side of studying abroad. Just to note as well that you usually must be enrolled full-time while studying abroad, so you'll be studying the equivalent of 60 Cardiff credits per semester. Okay, flexibility. So can you learn something entirely different, or can you learn something from a different perspective? One really great example of this is there was a politics student who actually studied British politics, but he studied it in the US. So that gave him like a really interesting perspective about something that he's used to, but it's also different. Finally, are you taking replacement credits or undertaking a year abroad? This depends on your degree. So again, it would be a great question for your exchange coordinator. And be proactive, being proactive in the module choices can kind of help evidence that you're interested, and it can help evidence interest in your chosen field and show decision making as well. Another top tip just on modules is check if there are any restrictions. Sometimes there's a specific list of modules that are available to exchange students. Okay, moving on, we're on to how do I choose culture and location? I think it's important to remember that, yes, you're going to be studying abroad, but you're also going to be living there. And the local culture of where you live will have a huge impact on your study abroad experience. So it's a good idea to make sure that you research day-to-day life in the US, as well as different cultural attitudes and differences. As I'm sure you know, the US generally has quite a similar culture to us in the UK, but it's worth keeping in mind that it's such a huge country and attitudes can vastly differ from state to state. So we have culture here. So a question with that would be, what are the attitudes towards women, disability, sexuality, gender, ethnicity or religion? What groups are, if any, but what groups are discriminated against and why? Is it a cosmopolitan destination that you're looking for? And if it's not, how could this affect you? We also have dietary requirements. I know this seems a bit strange, but you really should think about this, because an example would be, say, if you're vegan, you might find it easier to meet those dietary needs in a city destination than you would somewhere more rural. I've mentioned laws here as well. So a great example with this would be the drinking age. As you know, the drinking age in the US is 21. If this is something that's really important to you and to your student experience, then I'd say you might want to consider an alternative, just because it's really important to stick to the laws of the country that you're visiting. And actually, before you do go abroad, we do go over this before you go. We've got location and climate. So location would be transport. It's really common to drive in the US. So if that might be difficult for you, you might want to go somewhere that has great public transport links. And climate, yep, just to mention, so the US, it's going to really vary from state to state, coast to coast, and it might sound really simple, but for some people, they want to go somewhere sunny, or they prefer somewhere with really cold winters and lots of snow. And a great thing about the US is it has all of these options in one place. Okay, mental and emotional health support. It's always worthwhile just to check the services available at the partner. If this is something that's really important to you, please do get in touch with us and we can help you with this as well. It is worth noting that Cardiff University offers comprehensive advice on equality and diversity on the intranet. So before you make an application to study abroad, we just think you should research these destinations and find out a little bit more information. And like I said, do please book an appointment. I've put a little bit more further advice about how to research this as well. Speak with past participants. So we do have a list of students who've been abroad in the past, and we can help facilitate that. And if you want to speak to someone who's been to a specific US partner, we can put you in touch with them. Read blogs from students who studied abroad. We do have our own blogging platform. It's called Cardiff University Globetrotters, so please check that out. And we've got good old-fashioned travel guides. You know, these are invaluable. They're really great to just get this overarching view of the culture and place that you're going to, and the internet. So I know that sounds really obvious, but it's not just Cardiff University, but lots of people from different universities have studied abroad in the US. So there's really great information out there. After you look at the US as a whole and you look into the culture, you might want to get into the specific partners a little bit more and dig into the specific campus experience a bit more deeply. This is something that I feel like students overlook, but it really does make a huge difference. You should really be asking yourself similar questions that you would ask if you were applying for a UK university all over again. I've outlined them here, and generally you can find this information on the partner websites or promotional brochures. We've also got something called the Discover Global Opportunities Week notebook that I'll tell you all about later. So following on from those last questions, I just thought it would be useful if I could give you an example to show how research can help show the differences in host universities and how a little bit of a search can change your assumptions. These partners are all in the US, but they're really different. We've got Wyoming, you know, it's a rural location, it's kind of a small town, but the student population is quite large in comparison to the town, and it's in this beautiful location. We've then got San Francisco. This is one of our most popular partners. They have 26,000 students, but actually only 2,000 live on campus. So while you get this great city experience and it's, you know, it's a fantastic place, you might not have that campus experience. Finally, we've got the University of Florida. They have a huge campus environment. Loads of students. Just for reference, Cardiff has 30,000, so they have more than Cardiff. Also down the bottom here, I've just popped in the logos for the relevant sports teams. Just think it's quite interesting. We've got the Cowboys for Wyoming, and San Francisco and Florida also both have football teams called the Gators. So it's kind of like a gator off. So we've gone over where you can go and how you can choose. Let's move on to another big question. How much will it cost? I've outlined the four main costs here. We've got accommodation, visas and health insurance, flights, and then your general cost of living. A good idea, like a really good tip that we use, is when you're researching the cost of living generally, you might want to start with a specific city or area and then move on to specific campus costs for each university. You know, costs can really vary, so it's very important to do your research, and it's also quite personal, so everyone's costs are different. If you want a more objective view, there's this website called Numbeo, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, but it's really useful because you can compare the cost of living in a specific city in the US, and any country really, with the cost of living in Cardiff. Just to add as well, financial planning can be a little bit overwhelming at first, especially when looking at going abroad. So this would be a really good time to book an appointment. We've got a lot of experience in this area and we can help you find all the information you need. We've also got a range of resources. So I know I'm going to suggest this quite often throughout this week, but the best place to start would be the intranet. On the international exchange pages, we have a dedicated cost to consider for an international exchange page. When we built this page, we actually surveyed our partner universities and we asked them for specific costs that students might face, whether this is visa costs, health insurance, evidence of funds. I find this is particularly useful for US partners as well. And we also have this nifty little thing called the Global Opportunities Cost Calculator. It is pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. I actually mentioned this in our presentation yesterday, and if I'm completely honest, I'm going to mention it every day this week because I just think it's great. I love to use this during student appointments because it just makes life so much easier. It's fairly self-explanatory, but you pop your expenses in on the left, your income on the right, and it calculates the difference between the two. Just think it's a really great tool because once you've put in all the amounts, you can just save it and then you have a record of your expected expenses. You can find this on our funding page on the intranet. So going back to one of the main costs of an international exchange, you probably find that one of the biggest costs you're going to face is your accommodation. I put some examples here just to show how costs can really vary between partners in the US, and you can see that it does vary quite a lot. Of course, the accommodation that you get is also going to vary. Some questions that you might want to ask when you're looking at accommodation would be, do they offer on-campus accommodation or is this guaranteed? Also, a big question would be, is this single room or would it be sharing? In the US, it's really common to share a room, and I'm sure we've all seen this in films. I've also put some picture examples here. But also, some of our US partners do have single rooms if that's what you want. It just keep in mind these might be a little bit more expensive. Another question that you might want to ask when looking at accommodation is there a compulsory meal plan? In the example for San Francisco here, I've included the cost of a meal plan. A meal plan is actually really common in the US. So instead of having a big kitchen where you'd have all your meals, you kind of go to this big dining hall. It is a little bit different to what we're used to, but one student told me recently that she really loved the idea of a meal plan because it was just one less thing to worry about, and it just meant that her costs for food were kind of covered. I think it does highlight, though, it is important to thoroughly check what the partner institution has to offer. Again, as we mentioned before, especially if you have any dietary requirements, and just to double check everything before you make a commitment. I've put here that flexibility is key, just because it can make a huge difference when looking at costs of accommodation. Okay, so next we move on to visa costs. I just want to say, first of all, that we're not qualified visa advisors in this team. So we're unable to give really specific advice about applying for your US visa or any visa. In most instances, students taking part in an international exchange to the US will need a visa, but of course this can vary. I've given a general idea of the cost of the visa, and this is also on our cost to consider page. We also link to the US Embassy site, so you can check out all of the eligibility criteria and the required documentation yourself. I think it's important to highlight evidence of funds here as well. For the US, you generally need to provide evidence of funds to support yourself. This is part of the application that you make to the host. The US evidence of funds is slightly different to other countries, as in rather than a country-wide amount, each institution has its own amount, and we've actually asked the partners and we've put these on our cost to consider page. With evidence of funds, it does depend, so please do check with the host, but evidence you need to provide kind of may include bank statements or your parents' accounts, as well as evidence of scholarships or funding, or a combination of all these which can meet the estimated expenses. And another thing to mention, I know I just mentioned it, but once you begin to get into these specific costs, so accommodation or visas, it's always a good idea to speak to the host. You don't have to wait until you're actually applying. You can just get in touch with them at an early stage just to ask these questions. Quite often as well, they do have qualified visa advisors on staff who, if you have those specific questions, they can help you there. I know that people sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable or awkward about it, but if you do feel that way, then just let us know and we can get in touch with them for you. Okay, next up and finally, we have health insurance. So I don't need to tell you that health insurance is really important, and most of the time it's a mandatory requirement. In the US as well, they don't have a national health service, so it's even more important. I've outlined some of the costs for some of our partners here. Again, this just highlights the range available. I actually think that that's a good thing though, because it can suit all different budgets or what people are looking for. I do have one piece of advice for students who may be looking now to study abroad and who are going into this kind of in-depth research. Please remember to read the policies. Just make sure that you know what you're covered for and what you aren't covered for. If you're finding any of this information kind of difficult to find, just Google the university, health insurance, international exchange, and usually this information comes up. So going back to our original 3 partners, you can see once I start to add more detail, the differences really stack up. I recommend that if you do have more than one partner in mind, that you actually make one of these kind of lists yourself, just a comparative list, looking at the different costs. For example, I've put, Wyoming has a lower cost of living, San Francisco is slightly higher, but it's a bit more flexible. And in the University of Florida, it's kind of mid-range cost of living. Okay, so we've asked what are the costs, but now another important question is there funding available? First of all, I'd just like to remind you that you won't need to pay tuition fees to the partner. You just carry on paying Cardiff University as usual. Those going abroad for a full year also are able to have quite a significant reduction on their fees and only need to pay 15%. We also have something called the Global Opportunities Bursary. This is a non-means tested bursary that eligible students can receive to help towards some of the costs. These are actually subject to annual review and they haven't been confirmed for next year yet, but just to give you an idea, students going abroad this year were able to receive a one-off bursary of £700 for a year and £500 for a semester. But just to remind you again, these are to be confirmed. Finally, we have student finance. It sounds obvious, but just to remind you, you are entitled to receive the same student loan or grant whilst abroad that you get in the UK. Actually, some students may be eligible to receive an overseas rate. There's also something called the travel grant, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. And finally, if you are thinking about going abroad and you have these specific student finance questions, we've got a really great advice and money team here at Cardiff who can help you. I've just popped their email there. So as I mentioned, the travel grant, this is something provided by Student Finance. So it's external to our offices. It's a reimbursement grant, so eligible students may be able to claim back some of their costs, and I've outlined them here. So it's medical insurance, visa costs, vaccinations, as well as some travel. The amount that you can claim is actually dependent on your household income, and the amount does vary between Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales. We've got a really great comprehensive fact sheet on the intranet that the Advice and Money team put together for us, so please check that out. The the travel grant is a really great source of funding, so I do recommend you take a look. Okay, so I know I've covered quite a lot of information that I've thrown at you, but I just want to kind of bring up some quotes for you, as I think it's important to see, is it worth it? We asked students who studied abroad in the US what they would say to students like you who might be considering an international exchange in the US. I think these really sum up the experience. My favourite was Simon, who studied at Northern Arizona University. He said how he would happily emigrate to America following his exchange. Also, please pay attention to Abby in the bottom, who says, make sure to do your research. I think if that's one thing that you take away from today's presentation, I hope that that's it. Okay, so you've taken a look at the partners, you've made all your informed decisions, and now I can practically hear you screaming at me, okay, Jenny, how do we apply? So first up, here's an overview of the internal application, just for you to have an idea of how things work. Of course, please do keep in mind that when you can go depends on your school and your degree programme, and some schools might have a slightly different process, but it's a good idea to check. But generally, you'll begin the process of applying around about a year or so before you're due to go abroad. As a good example, students who are due to go abroad next autumn semester are now in the process of applying. For most students, they just follow these steps. So step 1, you apply to your school. They'll send you details of the online application via email. Step 2, complete the application and you choose your top 3 destination. The great thing about this is that you can actually mix together international exchange destinations and European destinations. So your first choice should be where you really want to go, but if for some reason that's not available, we'll then look at your second and third choices. Step 3, we've got schools to review applications and inform us of successful applicants. I think this can be a little bit confusing, but schools do have their own eligibility criteria and they do review applications. So if you're worried about, what grades should I be getting or what are your criteria, please do get in touch with your school. Then we have, if your application to the school is successful, we will then formally nominate you to the host institution. If the nomination is accepted, then you go on to apply. You apply for your visa if required. And then step 4, we've got attend a pre-departure session. These are sessions that kind of get you used to what to expect when going abroad. And we go into a lot more detail than we would just in these kind of presentations. These are typically held in March or April for those going abroad in autumn and November for those going abroad in spring. I think the message that I really want you to take away from this slide is that although it can sometimes seem like there's quite a lot to do when studying abroad, when it's broken up into stages like this, it's really quite manageable. I think the key is to be organised and to stick to those deadlines, and just remember that we in the Global Opportunities team, we're here to support you through it. Okay, so before we hear from one of our ambassadors about his experience in the US, I just want to let you know where you can find more information. We've put together this online notebook containing materials from all of our partners. We've also broken it up into different regions, so you can, if you come to one of our talks later on in the week, you can find the corresponding materials. You can see I've put the study in the US section here, so we've got some fact sheets and promotional materials from our partners. It's really great, so please do check it out. Search Discover Global it's such a mouthful. Discover Global Opportunities Week on the intranet. Okay, so next up we have Joe. Joe attended Washington State University as part of our international summer program, and I'm sure he has some great advice about studying in the US. So Joe, if you're there, please introduce yourself and tell us about where you went.
Sure. Hi, my name's Joe. Yeah, that's a terrible picture of me. I apologise. And I went to Washington State University, which is in sort of east, kind of the east bit of Washington State, not on the coast. And I went for about a month in 2019. Yeah, in July 2019. It was great. I had a great time. So a bit about me. I'm studying pharmacy, and I went in the summer between my second and third years. And I would recommend it to no end, even to someone who's not very used to traveling. So for me, I had never been outside of Europe on my own, let alone with my family even, and it was just such an amazing opportunity. In terms of like advice and stuff, for like applying to go abroad and things, I would say don't be worried about it as much, because I had no experience at all and I was fine in the end. I'd never even got on a plane before, and my first flight was on my own, and it was transfer at 3 different airports, and it was very scary, but it was brilliant.
Oh, wow.
That was my first time on a plane. But yeah, so that's probably one of the first things I recommend is book your flights as soon as you know what time you need to be there. Book your flights early so you don't have to transfer the 3 different places. What else?
So I think how would you would you how would you really sum up your experience of the US? I mean, was there anything that was like a real highlight for you, or general tips for kind of living in the US?
In terms of tips of living in the US, if you want to eat, if you want to cook for yourself, eat healthy, it's quite hard to do. So you have to go to specialist supermarkets. and stuff. So that because Safeway doesn't provide, like, I'm a vegetarian, and so it's quite hard. It was quite hard for me to buy vegetarian food from Safeway. So in terms of like living in the US, as you said, you need to really check like if it's a cosmopolitan area or if it's like a rural area, what you can expect. I also went on my own as well. So like usually within the pharmacy degree, you go with like a person, but that person had to drop out. So it was scary, but it's still worth going even if you're going on your own, I'd say. And being the only international student there wasn't bad. As I went in the summer, it was basically just me and the postgrad students, which was a really interesting experience, I'd say. So studying in the US, as you said, is very different. It was far more, for me personally, because pharmacy is like a doctorate program over there. It's more independent stuff, but it's really useful for like because I'm now in my 4th year. It's really useful now because I'm using some of the skills that I got in that trip abroad now in my actual degree, which is really useful.
Yeah. That's great. That's really useful to hear. And just kind of finally, sorry to put you on the spot here, but if someone was kind of on the fence between some like Australia or the US, just very simply, would you recommend that they go to the US?
I would say yes.
That was the right answer.
Because it's just there's something so very different about it, and our culture is so much kind of saturated in this sort of American idea of college. It was really interesting to go and experience it for myself.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Oh, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you for coming along today. And, I'm sure everyone listening just got some really great advice there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so just to start to sum up a little bit, we're going to take some questions next, but just to find out more about our opportunities and for a full list of our partners, please check on the intranet. Also, if you'd like to have a chat about your options, please do get in touch with us and book an appointment, as we said. You can also follow us on social media through the Cardiff Uni Instagram account and the Cardiff University Students Facebook group. We post there about new opportunities and experiences like Joe's of our ambassadors. We also have a newsletter that we send out once a month. It's really great. It's got information about upcoming deadlines and new opportunities. So you can sign up to this just by scanning the QR code on the right here. Okay. And okay, let's have a look. Do we have any questions?
We have got some published, so I've moved them over so everyone can see them, Jenny.
Okay, first question we've got is, are there any limited spaces for each university? There are limited spaces. So the way that it works is it's an exchange. So they send our students and we send our students and they send their students. So we normally have a set amount of spaces each year. But the good thing about allocating to specific schools within Cardiff University is we make sure that there are enough spaces available for each school. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but just do keep in mind that it is limited. So there might be some competition for our more popular partners. Okay, next question. When is the deadline for applications? That really does depend on your school. So and also when you're going. So each school has their own deadline. It's a really good idea that you check with your school. Okay, anonymous. Ooh, what are the chances of getting your top 3? I think we really do aim for everyone to get their first choice. In the event that you don't get your first choice, we then look at your second. I think out of the top 3 choices, there's going to be something for you. I'd say it's a very good chance you're going to get within your top 3. Okay, and we've got, when you are nominated to the host university, are they obliged to accept you? Oh, that's an interesting question. I think because we have our own internal application process, that means we've double checked that you're academically able to go abroad and that you're, that you're suitable for an exchange. And I think our partner universities really take that into account. So they're not obliged. There could be something in your application that means you're not accepted, but they usually do consider that we've kind of pre-vetted everyone. Okay, where can we access the recording for this and other Go videos from the week? I think actually, Helen, that would be a good question.
So we are recording all of the sessions except for the drop-ins this week, and we are keeping the recordings. So at the moment, I would say if you just drop us a line on email for any of the sessions you might miss this week, if you drop us a line at go@cardiff.ac.uk, we will make sure to send you the links to the videos. We're hoping also to try and host them maybe on our YouTube channel or on our intranet pages, but we'll probably do that at the end of the week. But if you'd like to access any of the recordings throughout the week, just get in contact with us and we can send you the links.
Oh, okay, thanks, Led. So yeah, if we don't have any more questions, I think one final thing that I wanted to mention was
There's one extra question. Sorry, Jen.
There's one extra. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't scroll down.
It's okay.
Okay, how do we start the initial application process? So again, that's with your school. So just contact the academic school and they will send you details of how to apply and also their own criteria. So the first port of call is always going to be your academic school here at Cardiff. If you're not sure who your exchange coordinator is, either check on the intranet or just get in touch with us and we can put you in touch. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is our first time kind of running our fair virtually, and we'd love to get your feedback about it. So if you have 2 minutes to spare, please provide your thoughts on our survey, and that would be really great. You can follow this link and we'll just pop it in the Q&A, or you can find it on the main Discover Global Opportunities Week campaign page. But yeah, I mean, let me just double check if there's no more questions. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming to the presentation today, and I really hope that you consider studying abroad in the US because it's a fantastic place to go, and I hope you make it. Thank you.